2023. We're grateful for those that are in attendance and for those that showed up for the last, we had 2 meetings last week, but we're still trying to help folks understand the format for 2023. We're basically going to have weekly meetings every week, but it's going to be focused on the digital world, which is primarily based around decentralization for humanity. As you can kind of see here, the goal and objective, at least of this initial tagline, which is the site as of today, which we'll talk a little bit about, is welcome to a new millennium of sovereignty, privacy, health, and unity for all people, all of humanity. So that's really the target and the market. And that talks a little bit about, well, does that mean that we don't have sovereignty? We don't have privacy? We don't have what we would call health or unity? So that's kind of the problem statement and the solution all in and of it by a group of folks that are just people that care and people that not just look at it from this dispensation, but from when we actually all get to pass on from this life. And the next generation can grab that baton and just keep running. We'll continue to do the best that we possibly can until the next generation picks up with it. So we're grateful for all those who are in attendance, especially on all the different streams, which we'll talk about here in a second. This is, again, a digital world focused meeting. The agenda will be primarily focused on advancements of the prior week, maybe things that are going on in the future week, and how people can get involved, how everyone can get involved, whether it's members, whether it's service providers, whether it's councils. And those are really the 3 different archetypes that then tie into organizations and digital assets, but it's all based around decentralization. A lot of people are like, well, what is decentralization? And we'll go through that. But ultimately, when people say, well, is decentralization blockchain or is it crypto? Or the simple answer is yes, but it's all about key management. So if you look at a lot of the negative things, I'd say almost any of the negative things that have happened in what the world would call crypto, one, I think a lot of the different assets and organizations or even projects or entities that are in it are necessarily not focused on the future of humanity, but on the future of their own pocketbook or their own benefit, whether it's based on speculation or the work of some others. But a lot of what you'll see here within the digital world is a lot of people coming together to provide value for others, for humanity. We'll talk a lot about questions and answers. Really, it's about people coming and learning what's going on and then how they can actually plug in and add value. Initially, these meetings may be mono-based, so it may be just information. But as people start understanding, and as society continues to basically, I don't want to say come apart at the seams because that's pretty crash, but I would say basically be confusing, very confusing, and get more confusing as time goes on. Hopefully there's pieces and elements of clarity that can happen. We're grateful for those that are actually within these different ecosystems, namely some of the initial companies that helped to create this digital world. Clear companies, particularly Clear United, which will, as you'll see, and I'll actually show you real quick. You'll see here different rooms per se. So you've got ripple effect, you've got town halls, you've got different ecosystems, and actually I'll show you how they kind of all come together. Over time, you're going to see this screen here start growing with different groups and different ecosystems. The green ones are actually running meetings that are live, and they can happen at the same time in parallel. But imagine these actually turning into different councils. And these may be public councils, and people may have their own little ecosystems. For instance, these are rooms that I personally work on or with every day. But kind of what you see here. So imagine you've got 2 countries here. And as these countries basically start up, which, by the way, you can see that we had a meeting here on December 13th, and then another one here just this last week, on Wednesday this last week. So this is actually a lot of how you'll see accountability, you'll see report outs, but ultimately how the digital world brings people together in unison at the same time. So some folks may say, you know what, I'm seeing this presentation on YouTube, or I'm seeing this presentation on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. And there's different channels. So like you can actually see it on multiple different channels on multiple different platforms. But then people within different councils can actually come together and not just use this technology. When I say this technology, I'm talking about Clear One, which is a byproduct of Clear software. So you can, if you go to clear.software, you can kind of see about it. And I'd like to just say a name, Jerry Ulich, and just put a moment out there. Last year, he passed away, and he spent literally a decade helping to build some of the technology we're talking about. We'll also introduce you to some of the technologists behind it. But regardless, we're grateful for his dedication and commitment. And that's a perfect example of someone that dedicated their life and then put the technology out there. Majority of it is based on open source technologies. Majority of it can just be literally hosted and run without a centralized ecosystem that can actually take it down. And that's the goal around key management in the digital world, where you have an architecture where it can actually be totally decentralized and not taken down from a centralized standpoint. And I know most of you already understand the importance of that, but we're grateful for those that actually take the time to show up, to actually go through it. This may feel similar to Clear United ripple effects, and you're welcome to go through and ask the same types of questions. How do I tell folks about this? How do I drive awareness? How do I get involved? Please don't hesitate to be able to be involved in what you've done historically, or even engage in really where the digital world's going. And the digital world is something that we can actually all get a part of, and not just be an influencer, but actually have a voice, have a vote, have a perspective that will help to build technology for the future of humanity. Now, the question is, will we do it right? Will we do it right the first time? Will we do it right the second time? The goal, remember, we talked about it before, it's building a new millennium, an infrastructure for a new millennium is the target, okay? And so basically, we're grateful for those that are helping, whether they're fielding questions that may be tied to historical things from Clear United or Ripple Effect, as that was something that we don't want to just stop. But at the same time, the energy and the focus and the shift can be around how people can actually start understanding the digital world. Because believe it or not, for those of you that showed up every single week at Tuesday at 5:30 Mountain Time, for the last couple of years, it's not just walking away from that. It's actually building. You've learned a lot. You've asked wonderful, brilliant questions, and we've all grown together. But the point is how can we actually take this so that it's bigger than all of us, so that others, not just individuals, not just families, not just communities, not just businesses or organizations, but countries can actually have something that they can say, you know what, I can get behind that. I can believe in that. I can support that. I can stand behind that. It may be a simple city that says, you know what, this city is going to stand for that. It's going to use a platform that does commerce like that does dispute resolution like that works with service providers, that actually drives accountability and discipline in very simple ways that's probably not had by the majority of us. I don't know about you, but this last week I went into a DMV, a Department of Motor Vehicle here in the United States of America. And I actually think that in Utah, they're run really well. But it was crazy, the line. I went and ran some other tasks. I actually went and created, I won't even go down that road, but it was wonderful. The tasks were, until it's done, I don't want to jinx it. So I won't actually tell you what it was. But there's a culmination of the physical world and the digital world that will come together. And even though we may say banks, money exchangers, stock markets, commodities, equities, currency creators, those are all maybe secret combinations that are actually doing things that are not good for the betterment of humanity. But some of them are actually saying, our eyes are open and we want to do what's right. And we also, and majority of them are like, for instance, in the US, there's different categories. So you've got the old savings and loans that kind of went away. You got banking that's still in existence. You got credit unions. And credit unions, a lot of them, for instance, if you've seen my presentation here, if I go to clear.co.com, this is kind of all the Clear companies that help the digital world get initially going. And there's a right here. So if you look at Decentralized the digital world. This keynote I gave in front of about 30 different credit unions. And a lot of them were like, we want to be a part of the future. We want to be relevant in the future. This is not good. This tells me I'm running way too many things on my system. As a matter of fact, I'm going to shut down all of this over here. Okay, so hopefully, there we go. So if you haven't seen this presentation, this is in front of a bunch of different credit unions as well as a bunch of different countries. And it was received very well by countries. It was even received well by different departments in the United States that we're saying, please be accountable to your people. So I'll put this link in here for those that have not seen it. Anyways, I'm going to get back to this agenda. But I went back from this other Aaron in the banking world, which was received well, and I'll just put that on a shelf. Back over to this DMV, and it was like, they didn't care. There's no accountability. There's no, how do you say, on a scale of 0 to 10, this was my experience, or here's my customer sat, or the accountability wasn't there. And from those that are on this call and understand the history of almost the last 30 years, service providers are really there to actually, they live and die by that customer satisfaction, what we call net promoter score or customer loyalty. And that's one of the reasons that you've seen a separation between governments and service providers, where the quality of private service providers is always higher than public government. It's just there. Now, I want to put a shout out to long ago, 2011 to 2013. I moved a beautiful family of 8. These guys here, and I want to put another shout out to this little kiddo here that I always think about with that photo. But my point is we moved to a country named New Zealand, and I would see billboards where on there they were asking, "How are we doing?" I remember a law within schooling that the people didn't like after the vote, and within 3 days they rescinded that law. It was amazing to see. And then when we go back to some of the things we're seeing within society today, where treaties may be questioned, especially like in New Zealand, it's called the Treaty of Waitangi. They went back, and I saw what would be called Maori people, and I'll just say colonial people. I won't say white or black or brown, but basically these different people that came from different roots, how they would either come together and not serve one another and clash, but where they came together and actually served. Like down in Queenstown, there's a plaque on the wall that says something to the tune of, and I'm going to mess it up because I don't remember it exactly, others over self. And it was just beautiful to see within that society how serving others and caring about others, it's not saying that there's not class distinction, that there's not people that don't work harder or do this or provide that. That's not what we're talking about, because that is a natural thing within the human race to say, I'm going to be a better self. I'm going to try harder. And for me, is one of the reasons why I can't say that I actually did this, but I didn't really agree with a lot of the sports that are out there, because I think it's a natural thing. The sports will naturally put other people above or below others. But then we'd end up, and my wife, and I'm grateful for it, she would say, no, these kids need to be in rugby and in soccer and in football and in tennis and in swimming. And to see what it would do to the individual, because remember, we're all one world, one people, but we're an individual. Some of us say, I struggle because I feel alone and I need a companion. And some say, I really can do without that companion. They're just a waste of time and more craziness and chaos in life than anything. But it's that individual that then comes together with another to then create a family, to then create a community, to then create what we're talking about with this new ecosystem of decentralized systems. So it's really those parts and components. I'm going to move forward this intro because this isn't done yet. This is a private membership association. By the way, Terrence, welcome back. Wally, thank you. L, massive appreciation. This is a private membership association based upon this Declaration of Unity for Decentralized Communities, because that's what we're talking about, communities. life, love, family, communities, and ultimately choice. Why? Because it's been stolen from so many of us and we don't even realize it. We don't even realize it. So choice is a massive part of it. If you haven't read this Declaration of Unity, please do so. If you just go to digitalworld.earth and you click on governance, that is what governs all of the direction, purpose, structure, is this Declaration of Unity. I personally believe this Declaration of Unity is just as important as the Declaration of Independence for the United States of America, which then came after that, the first Constitution, which then now 150 plus countries have their own Constitution. Not all of them have their own declarations, but they all have their own form of governance, and so be it. And that's a perfect example. All of these copies of constitutions, for instance, New Zealand is one of the latest ones. South Africa is another latest one. These different countries that are building their own constitutions, they have certain fiscal policies, whether it's around finance, around health. Some of them are colonialized and they say, okay, well, we're actually a prime minister that has a ministry of health and a ministry of this and a ministry of that. And if that works, great. But what we'll get to is maybe there's a different way. So this is basically a private membership. This digital world, the jurisdiction is the planet Earth. All of us are connected. I showed you earlier with all of these different rooms here. Oops, sorry. I don't want to point out single rooms. But when you look at all these different rooms, the green ones are the ones that are actually active right now. So like there's people inside of them that can ask questions, they can interact on their own, they can interact directly. But what we're seeing is different decentralized groups of people that can come together, that can communicate, that can act in their own accord, and they're using technology. We're all connecting through technology. And technology is where the word digital actually comes from. It's not an analog thing like of a cable. Like when we first started making phone calls, it was with a cable. Maybe it was a little, what's the little, I'm thinking the type, what's the tap? Everybody remember what I'm talking about? Actually came right out of this ecosystem. Okay, I won't go there. So the Declaration of Unity is super important. There may be some forward-looking statements that we'll talk about. There's a reason why this is thrown in here, but we'll leave that there. For those of you that are not aware, the digital world is built off of other ecosystems that originally started, known as the Clear companies, that basically focused on different formats of technology that are all decentralized, namely a phone and storage. The combination of those two in a model that comes together like this is basically what we're all talking about, for those of you that this may be a new meeting. But we generally report out on what has happened in the prior week and then what's coming up in the next week. So from a technology standpoint, we've made huge progress. I'm going to see if I can grab a screen. So, I don't want to pull that over. So you'll notice here, these are all different pages that are about ready to go live. So reputation, there's actually, let's see if this has actually been updated. Nope. So reputation is actually breaking into 3 areas for the individual, the organization, and the asset. Voting system, this is absolutely making progress, finally making progress. And you know why it's making progress? Because we actually were doing it wrong the first time. We were building it from the mobile interface and then trying to plug it into the web interface. That was wrong. We had to build it from the web interface, then plug it into the mobile interface, all based upon the decentralized keys. If decentralized keys is something you're not familiar with, you'll get familiar with as you continue to pay attention and get involved. The digital wallet side of it, these are all basically things that are ready to go live, and you'll see them go live between this meeting and next week's meeting. So the digital health infrastructure, a lot of good videos there. Digital tax, there's a ton to talk about here, and an amazing service provider. I believe that one that will actually be one of the biggest in the future. They currently work with all of these different centralized exchanges. And what's the problem with these centralized exchanges? What's the difference between any of these ecosystems
You don't own your key.
You got it. You got it. It's exactly right. So metal, block, literally, they all could have the same type of mystery and margin and liquidity issues on the back end. But with the reputation, the digital asset reputation stuff, you can actually see if they've got one-to-one ratios. So that's a different conversation. Reporting, filing, but there's massive advancements here. Digital Life, it now works on any Android device. It's not just Clear phones. And simple way to get it, you'll see simple how-tos. Land management, you'll see the start of that. And then as countries want to actually adopt it, which we'll talk about some of the countries and some of the beautiful advancements there. We believe that finances, such as mortgages, such as titles, such as payments, will actually all come into this new digital world. Why? Because it's actually cryptographically secured. It secures the folks that are putting up the money for the house. It secures the people that actually want to pay for the house and actually possibly pull out some equity. I remember the first mortgage that I had, which was like a long time ago, actually even before I was married, over 25 years ago. So 26 years ago, got my first mortgage, and it was like, wow, this really is an American dream, to be able to buy a house and to be able to get the financing to buy a house. And to be honest with you, there is a lot of truth to that. But then on the other side of it, when you start looking at the time value of money, you start questioning, what is this materialistic race? And is it just something that I'm in a race by myself, against myself? You know, and everybody has to go through that. Fast forward, I even did more stupid financial, went and bought like a $4 or $5 million house, and it's just the thinking that was kind of the race. That is what defines success. I was so very wrong, by the way. It has nothing to do with money. Nothing. But I guess that was a lesson that I was learning, but it tied into the housing world, because if you can provide for a family, well, maybe you need to provide more than just a house. Maybe you need to be present. Maybe you need to be connected. Maybe you need to actually care. Maybe you need to, I don't know. For me, I never got into the sports stuff. I like watching sports. I love playing sports and being active. Or maybe some folks are like, you know what, I just want to work out every day, and that's what it is. But whether it's, and I'm not going to talk life stuff. I know a lot of you, that's where we connect, is in the real world. But mortgages are very interesting because it's probably your biggest bill and the biggest thing that will drive your activities. And the activities as the individual will drive habits, which will then usually create who we are in life. So mortgages are a big deal. We'll come back to that. What's this one? This one are fiat cards. So you basically match up a physical card in the fiat world. When we say fiat, we're talking about the existing financial system of whatever country you're in. So it can be in renminbi, mark, pound, yen, you name it. But if they transact, they just go and have a foreign exchange side that transacts it. And what people don't understand is all the fees you pay, whether it's to run on the rails of Discover, American Express, MasterCard, Visa, or whether it's to pay the transaction fees to just have a bank account to do it, or to have a card to do it, or to have a foreign exchange transaction to do it. And most people don't even understand, how do I even create the transparency to see the transaction and total costs? So as the cryptography or crypto or blockchain or decentralized world continues to mature, however you want to label it from a marketing standpoint, if the individuals own their own data, they own their own asset, they own their own keys, then the future can truly be decentralized. You don't have to have what's happened historically, where I'm going to come back to these lands, because a comment that was made by a very important individual, he said, we're the smallest island in the world that's a country, and we're actually disappearing because of what the world would call its global warming. For those of you that have tuned in prior, you know the video that I'm talking about. I talked to this individual this last week, and he said the tribes used to maintain our lines of ownership that for land. First off, they don't sell their land. They recognize that the land is God's given gift to them, and they have a stewardship to maintain the land and not abuse it, even though they're watching it disappear because the water levels are rising and they literally have to go find other places to grow crops so they can feed themselves or to do basic things. Homes are disappearing and others. But he said, when we were tribes, we knew where the borders were. We knew where the land was, and we didn't have conflict. But when we started sticking in centralized maps, by the way, a lot of the stuff we're doing goes back to the native land ownership and then fast forwards to now, as far as we can gather records, right? But it's an open source mapping system that actually reviews land management from the native days to the current days. And his message was the current days, we have a lot of people that are kind of looking at land markers. I don't know, maybe if you bought a home and you have that little stake they stick in with the little yellow or red tip on it that they usually drive in, it's a rebarb type thing. Or they have a description that says this many feet from this place and this. I mean, it's all different depending on what jurisdiction you go into. But his message was, now we have land problems. Why? Because the majority of the people that actually start getting more and more of the land are the people that are actually managing the systems. Go figure. In his little world, it's really easy and transparent to see the fraud, the corruption, the theft. But if we look at it from a bigger scale, for instance, how much land in the United States, or let's take another large body of land, Canada or New Zealand or others, that even Japan, that's a really good example. How much of it, actually Japan's not a good example, but Canada, New Zealand, US, even Europe, how much of the land is now owned by the government? Look at Hawaii. Just 50 years ago, the land was owned by the people, and the government was subservient to help the people that own the land. They came up with this law, which they basically took from condominiums. And they took a condominium that goes up and they layered it vertically. And they basically have this law out there that says you can sell the land, not just leasehold it. You can sell it, and owners can actually own it, individuals or companies, organizations. Are you seeing people take care of land? Usually if there's an individual that owns it, they're going to improve it. They're going to make it better. And especially when you've got confined ecosystems like an island, it usually does appreciate in value. Why would it appreciate in value? Because everything is appreciating in value. Because all we do is we pump more money into the system. Why? And for those of you that are new to this, I'll share this one simple, actually 2 slides with you real fast to give you context. I'm sorry to tell you this, but there are secret combinations. They truly exist. They exist in different circles, and they know no borders. They know no currency. They know no specific country. They span languages, they span currencies, they span industries. Whether it's finance, tech, media, health, inside of health, maybe pharmaceutical, they all then creep into what we all call government. And government breaks into really 2 different ecosystems when it comes to these secret combinations. On the left, you see this thing we call private. And on the right, you see this thing we call public. And the difference is not that there's a difference between $1 here and $1 here. It's that one is publicly known and one that's privately known. And the private dollars basically work together in unison. And that's why they're secret combinations, because they're working together to basically get certain things that can happen within society. So for instance, have we seen anything in the last 2 years around health, media, finance, and tech that has basically taken over governments? And one would argue, you're crazy, Mike. The governments were already taken over 12 years before that, 16 years before that. There were just different combinations that were working, but they're more and more transparent. And what I mean by that is when we talk about secret combinations, for instance, what is the World Economic Forum? It is It is an ecosystem. I've personally been to Davos. I've personally seen how these things work. I've personally recorded the dances. I've personally talked to chief medical officers of Pfizer and Johnson and Johnson. This was 2, 3, 4 years before this fiasco of what we call a pandemic or whatever you want to call it. And I won't even get into details because some of the streams that we're talking on, they use transcription, and I've already been muted on multiple levels. So all I would say is whatever your channel you're watching it on, go look at my videos from 4 years ago and see how many interactions and likes there were compared to today. And you go from like 400 down to 4. So shadow banning is absolutely real. The things that we say in this digital ecosystem is absolutely real. And the big tech tie to it, and I've been saying this for a long time, even before Twitter was purchased by Mr. Musk and some transparency was had, all we're saying is, okay, well, great. Secret combinations are real. There's private, there's public, and governments and public are actually creating money. All my point is that's why inflation's going to continue. It's not that we got to be scared of it. That's why inflation is real. That's why things, I don't know. I got a photo today of some shelves, egg shelves, where you'd buy eggs. They were empty. I don't know if your part of the world gets eggs, but in Venezuela, eggs, now this isn't today, but this was about a year and a half ago. It was $2,400 for a dozen eggs, US dollars, because of the value of them. They were valuable. They fed people. They were real food. When you think about real foods, I mean, some people think about, beets and radishes and potatoes and just different natural things that come from the earth. My point is food is a very big topic in the future. The ability to grow food, the ability to have water and soil and air that's actually not contaminated. I don't know about you, but is the weather in your side of the world, and we probably got people that span 7 or 8 different countries, 3 or 4 different continents. Is the weather in your part of the world different than you've ever seen it? I mean, where I personally live, I've lived there for over a decade, and I was born in this same place, and I've grown up here like probably 30 years of my life. I've never seen the kind of snow that I'm seeing, which I actually think is way cool, by the way, even though like last night we lost power for 4 or 5 hours, which is way not common in this neck of the woods. It's because there's so much snow, 2, 3, 4 feet. We didn't get 4 feet, but one night we got 3 feet in one night of snow. I mean, but the point is so much snow then lands on the trees, then the trees break and they fall on the lines. Power should be decentralized. You shouldn't have the lines. They're ridiculous in the first place, but that's a whole nother conversation. That's a real conversation. By the way, I challenge those of you that didn't read the Till paper for the energy stuff. If you haven't read that, you're missing out, because that is like Tesla quality, the intelligence behind what we have been given the opportunity to be a part of on this earth is amazing. Decentralization is a true and correct principle, not just because it stops secret combinations from functioning or financial systems from overtaking, because he who creates the money. Yeah, so some people are asking for the location. If someone could find that would be greatly appreciated. It's complicated on how you get there. All right, I'll do it real fast. Well, no, I don't want to. But the point that I'm trying to say is decentralization is a very important, true and correct principle. And it's not just with power. It's not just with light. It's not just with growing food. It's not just with how governance and laws can be created, which we'll talk about that. But anyhow, I'll stop blabbing and try and get back to the agenda. So prior week, we had a wonderful opportunity to talk with 3 new countries, and I'm going to come through these 3 countries. One was Tuvalu, another was Vanuatu, and another was Fiji. These are small little countries in a similar part of the Pacific / Oceania that are accountable to their people. Why? Because they straight up say, you know what? For instance, Vanuatu, not just were they controlled by the Brits, but they were also controlled at the same time by France. And they said, goodbye to both of you. We're going to govern ourselves. We're going to put our own people in. Same thing with Fiji, just this last couple weeks. It's literally, thank you for whoever, yeah, Danielle, I appreciate that. But we've basically had an interaction with these folks. And what's gorgeous as we're starting to kind of venture into the business development side of this. And what I mean by business development is it's a process of really understanding the problem or the issue and the solution and the fit, and then letting it self-select to actually manifest. And really it's driving awareness. Why would I even say that? It's basically a go-to-market strategy on segments. For those of you that were in Clear United, that is your opportunity to tell people, friends, family, community around what it is. Are you going to have conversations with prime ministers and presidents and others? Probably not. But I would actually say, but don't you dare not believe that you can. We all are equal and we can. But the focus of this digital world is to go direct to government. So that's kind of the go-to-market strategy. And when we're talking to them, when we start, actually, I've learned this from talking to one of them. He's like, my question was, can I come out next week and actually meet with you? He says, we're the least visited place in the whole Pacific Ocean. I'm sure that there are others, but he's the least visited country. I won't name which one. I said, can I come out and meet with you next week? And he says, no, because I won't be here next week. And I says, where will you be? And he says, I'm going to be at this Pacific Technological, and I'm actually going to play this real fast. Let's see if I'm actually going to just play this part of it. What I want you to try and notice is look at the people, look at the roots that they come from, very diverse. Look at the type of technology and notice they throw blockchain in there. They know that blockchain is a part of the future, but do they really see how it can unwind and actually become benefit to their future generations, to their bottom line, to their economy? This organization has been around since 1979. For those that are not aware, the World Economic Forum was started in 1971. This was created 8 years afterwards. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad. But when we talk about PT or PTC, the C is actually stands for council. Isn't that interesting that what we've actually been building is within this digital world, the different systems are all councils. So when we go back and we understand these different pieces of land, most of them were driven by successful leadership that actually kept them alive. That's why they're here 4,000 years later. Whereas other civilizations usually, I mean, you talk about what the world says are some problems. I would say our generation, the generation that I'm born in, 70s, 80s, 90s, we'll be lucky to actually have 80% of humanity left with as many nuclear war and tactical warheads that we've created. And I'm not even talking about pandemics and other topics there. But these councils are really the right way to govern systems. And you just don't have to take my word for it. You can look at a lot of different histories. You can look at cultures that have stayed alive. because of how they've actually managed different parts of their lands. So the lands may have, for instance, in New Zealand, you're known as a mountain, and then the population around that mountain goes to a marae. The mountain itself is known as an iwi, or an iwi type structure. So you've got the area, maybe it's the bigger community. Then you've got the local kind of group of families that would go to a marae. And then you've got the family unit, then the individual unit. But that structure is known through successful cultures. Where did the Mayans go? Where did the Incans go? These are cultures. Some people would say, you know what, they're still around. For instance, the Kuna Indians, it's about a population of 75,000 indigenous, native, sovereign people that have not been taken over. In 2005, Phil Lane, the gentleman that did the video, myself and a wonderful man named Greg Jackson went down and met with these folks. And we met with the leaders within these different ecosystems. And that was one of my first introductions to the United Nations, because those were the translators that would actually we put big servers on canoes and donkeys and took them out. And then we had satellite connections that basically brought the internet connection filtered. So pornography and all the other dark stuff wasn't getting through, but the medicine man could actually use an internet connection to be able to ask questions as they needed. So they used the internet, and this was it was like 2005, like I said, they used the internet to be able to have not knowledge to the masses, but knowledge to certain medicine men so that they could actually know, does this need to go in and actually get, because one of the big reasons we were there is people were dying when they didn't have to die. And so they sponsored this. And anyways, I'm getting off topic, but my point is these cultures have been around for a very long time because of how they were tribally governed. And when we say tribe, that's how a council works as well. So when we talk about this different ecosystem, and I'll pull up, let's see if I can. Well, anyways, the point that I'm trying to make is heading to this event next week. So actually this week, it happens once a year, and it's gathering all of the folks from the Pacific at this one event. I'll let it wrap up here and you can. So I don't know about you, but I'm just grateful that this council exists. I've actually already been able to set up meetings with the CEO of this council, which I don't know why, a council would have a CEO, but we'll ask that question, and then help them to understand what the digital world is about and see if the digital world can play a real role within the work that has already been created. It would be just amazing. And to be honest with you, this is kind of how this work has been going for the last 13 plus years. You just keep moving. You keep going, even though there's darkness. And I use this analogy all the time. You're in a vehicle, you have your headlights, you can see 50 feet down the road, but you can't see 60. And you just got to kind of move forward in faith, even though the velocity is fast and you may not be able to stop in time if something pops up. You may not have enough fuel to get to your next waypoint. That is how this journey has been. But ultimately, that risk doesn't have to be anymore. And that's one of the big shifts you saw in 2022. The first day, there was a letter that was sent out to all the different clear companies: health, finance, foundation, the storage side of it, the phone side of it, energy side of it, abundance or food side of it. Everything needed to be decentralized, because there's no difference between what we were doing and building all of these different teams and business units if we're just going to build another company. The goal is to build technology that it can compete with the biggest and the best, and you give it away to the world and let them be stewards over it. Now, there's got to be some structure to it. For instance, majority of systems today that are actually running mission critical systems run off of what the world calls as Linux. Linus Torvald is a gentleman that actually said, And Ballmer said, you know what? This is cancer. This is going to kill the software industry. Open source and Linux is cancer. But really, it's not. It's created the ability to actually have true independence and what I would call living the law of consecration in the technology world. No one owns it, no one controls it, but we all can benefit from it. But there is some elements of stewardship and accountability that actually needs to be set up so that it works. And Linus did a wonderful job of building a kernel that then goes into majority of the things. If you're running on a Mac system, believe it or not, that kernel actually runs from his world originally. Mac OS runs off of FreeBSD, which is a derivative of Linux that doesn't have a license where they have to provide continual development to the rest of the world. Now you think about that. That's so Apple can actually make a ton of money and be greedy. And ultimately, they actually own the keys. They own the encryption keys to the software. They own how it works with the hardware, and they control that. And the users get a better experience from it. But why is it that there's more Android devices than Apple devices in the world? I'm talking mobile access devices, phones. And why is it that the growth rate actually with the open source Android platform is continuing to take over the Apple world, even though some would argue, over my dead body, are you going to take an Apple phone out of my hands? I'm loyal through. I love the pixels. I love the cameras. I love and they're just loyal to it. But I guess the point that I'm driving at is we're grateful for these centralized ecosystems that have come up, but ultimately for the masses to adopt this, it has to be decentralized. So we'll see if this Pacific Telecom Council is actually one that will play well with the digital world from a mentality of not owning it, not controlling it, but technology that will change how humanity uses it. And most folks, I had a gentleman last night call me about 15 years ago. Well, it was a long time ago. We helped create an ecosystem together. His name is Cam Lee, wonderful gentleman. He helped start basically an anti-pornography venture that drove awareness around what pornography really did. And they went to schools. And wonderful gentleman, amazing stuff. But he reached out and he said, I've been tracking what you're doing, and I wanted to really understand Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies myself. And so he's jumped into it in a parallel path. I mean, I really feel like we both, we're raising families and doing different things in parallel paths. But he was like, I really see where this is coming and where it's going, and I want to be involved. And you'll find that service providers are really a group of people that have hearts and intents to serve others. You'll find him and many others that will be a part of the service providers in this new digital world. So when we talk about service providers, this is the current different providers that are out there. So some may be around dispute systems, some may be around marriage, some may be around how do you build reputation and the digital life, some may be around voting. But the point being is, imagine a framework in the digital world that physical countries or cities or provinces or communities can actually create. I would argue that how did the United States of America actually get formulated? It was really the same type of thing that we're talking about today. People got sick of Britain doing things that weren't accountable to them. And there were 13 different, let's just call them provinces or states or ecosystems or communities that said enough is enough. We're going to lock arms, and united we stand. The United States of America, we are. And then that Declaration of Independence, and then that Constitution, and then the Bill of Rights, and just beautiful things started happening. But I would argue that, you know what, we're not too far off from when those fathers of the United States of America signed that Declaration of Independence. Those 53 people. And most of them died an early death. They didn't die of old ages, that's for sure. But they did die and left a legacy for future generations to build on. And that's really what we're talking about with this digital world. But it's different. It's not just building on a document like the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. It's building on a framework. It's building on code. It's building on software development kits where software developers can plug into it. It's developing on a platform where future generations, whether they know it today, they'll figure it out sooner or later when they find out that, you know what, I can send money at real time and it doesn't really even cost anything, a thousandth of a cent. That's nothing. And I don't lose value when I do it. When people start understanding that they can do stuff like that, and there is no government in the middle of it, and there is no banking system in the middle of it, and it's actually much more accountable to the people and much more transparent, and fraud is less, and the ability to actually to see people that are no-gooders, that are literally scamming other people, it's really easy to find. It's some people would say, I don't believe it. I'm going to give you an example. Okay. In 2007, for those of you, so there's some people on this call that worked with me back in these days. And so they remember me getting on a plane. Back then, I didn't do a lot of travel, but I jumped on a plane from Utah and I went to Mountain View. And I went to a little company named Google. And we actually built a new platform for service providers. Because remember, that's our DNA. We helped create industries that were all what we call the managed service provider industry, MSP. We were actually ranked within a decade, so within under 10 years, we were ranked number one in this whole category that we helped create. They rank them every year in the top 100. But the point is Google was like, we see this service provider as an important channel to drive adoption of a new technology called Gmail. Okay. Do you remember Gmail when you would actually get spam and it was like 50% of your inbox or more was, I want to learn about this or this with this type of penile, this or this type of thing. I mean, just weird stuff. And all of a sudden, overnight, the spam went away. Like if you were using Gmail, it went away. I'm not talking AOL because that took some time and others, but if you remember, it was within a year, like 70, 80% of all the spam just disappeared. It disappeared because what they did was they crowdsourced people that said, this is spam. And enough people said, this is spam, the centralized system could actually say, this is spam. Block it. Just drop it right into people's spam box. They don't even get a chance to it. Now, what you're seeing with these centralized providers is not just are they doing that with spam, but it could be a valid message that you actually want, but because of your political party or whatever other things that you've selected you want to actually receive, but they could shift the message to you. Now, I'm not just jumping. This is not just me saying, oh, he's just off in la la land and paranoid. I can give you article that proves that this is happening at the governmental level. And I'll just say that because it's unfolding right in front of us now, we'll just say that let's let the time, as my father-in-law would say, be the great healer and the great revealer. Because in time, we will absolutely know what's going on. The question is, will we have our liberty and sovereignty and life as it was intended by whatever you want to call your creator? But we are not here by happenstance. It usually, remember, it goes back to that couple, that male and female hook up. It's usually the way it works. And there's a body that's created from that. Now, the question is, will that body, like my daughter, I better not say that one. No, I will. She went in for the first time today and actually had her blood drawn. She's going through a process and going to start a new chapter of her life, which is beautiful. And this is the first time that she's ever been poked. And I'll just say from a needle, and I'll just say taking blood. Okay, so we'll just leave it there. But then on the flip side, there's a big long application of all of these different things. Do you have this? Have you had this? Do you have anxiety? Do you have this? Are you sad? Have you ever had this itch? Not one did she check yes to. They were all no. Any infections, any surgeries, any allergies, not one ever. Okay. Down below it was also, could you ride a bike 3 to 15 miles a day? Could you walk for 8 to 10 hours a day? Could you, I mean, and it was a simple yes. So my point is she is a gift, especially to a father like myself, but she's a gift. We're all gifts. In these bodies, we're given the ability to actually have vitality. We're not supposed to wake up in the morning with hurt in our bodies. Sometimes if we go to bed tired, or if we go to bed maybe hungry, is it a bad thing? Some would argue you should never be hungry. I argue I actually eat one meal a day and I feel like $1,000,000. I need to move more because I love the work that we do and we just plug into it. But that's a different conversation. The point that I'm trying to drive at is it's our choice to put in what we're going to do with our bodies physically. And then one of the other questions was, have you had all of these different things? And I'm not going to give you the answer, but what I will do is I'll tell you that the amount of question marks for how many COVID and COVID variant vaccinations, not inoculations, vaccinations there are, outnumbers all the list of all the other stuff. And I won't even get into all that. You guys can figure that out if you haven't already figured it out. But what I'm driving at is, will we have our health in the future? As society, I think that we will. I think that there's knowledge that we haven't tapped into that is amazing. And I'll just say 2 words: quantum entanglement. Okay. Some people say that most things that have been invented have already been invented, and I won't be specific on when they said that and who said that, but they were so wrong. Decentralization is a platform that is a gift of natural physics and laws. And if we build systems on this decentralized systems, everything can change. We can have our choice back. We can have our freedoms back. This isn't paranoia around privacy. This is literally around how can we come together and lock arms as humanity for future generations. Shame on us. Shame on me. Shame on you. If we take our last breath and future generations have the oppression, the control, the slavery. I mean, we fought here in America, we fought a civil war over, should one human be able to control another human? Some of us know how it ended. Some of us know that it didn't ever end. But ultimately, with decentralization, people can self-govern. But there's so much that has to click into place. It's not just a technology. It is a heart and soul and intent that these different councils come together and work together on. So, this next week, you're going to see a lot of advancements. The councils, we've talked a little bit about prior week, talked about that there's open councils. Use your Clear phone, use your decentralized phone, use your Freedom phone, use your Armor phone, log in. If you don't know how to do it, we'll show you on future events. This is a goal system. So these are actually goals, wildly important goals. For those of you that have not run large or small teams, for instance, I believe one of the best run, I won't say nonprofit, I won't say religion, I'll say hospitality company is Marriott, also known as Starwood, also known as Ritz-Carlton, also known as Courtyard. So there's different, but Marriott understands setting one goal and coming up with one measurement for all throughout the whole company, all the companies. And the same team members that do that have helped us since 2005 every year set these goals. The red indicates where people can come in and plug in what they want to. But do you notice how it's actually around transactions? So this is what we're recommending by the end of a certain period, and usually they're done in years. So you'll find that things that we can directly control, we can't directly control all of this. Why? Because it's going to be the world, the digital world with councils. So the real target is a little bit further out there. But we need to actually build out the councils and then set the goals. And then usually what you measure, you improve. And sometimes you hit it and sometimes you miss it. But imagine if people can say, you know what, I will be accountable to do certain things from a team commit or a tactical commit or a task within a certain element. For instance, there was a video that we played with an individual. I don't even remember his name. And Daniela was like, you need to connect with this person. I said, here, take that task, go ahead and make that happen. So it's a matter of how can all of us get focused on one simple measurable goal? And I'm talking, how can different countries, different colors, different languages, how can we all say, you know what, decentralization is a true and correct principle I can get on board with, but how does that impact my own world? How does that impact, for instance, we saw 30 families get Christmas this year for $900 US. That's very different. And when we talk about Christmas, we're talking about, was that a religion thing? Is that a food thing? Is that a gift thing? All I'm saying is there was a difference within that ecosystem. And I'm not talking about giving something. You don't have to give things away, but what you can do is empower people to understand there's a different way. And most people don't understand that there's even a choice today. So I'll leave that at that, but this is a framework for goals. We've been through parts and pieces of this. There's new partners that we'll be meeting with. If you want to get on the partner committee, that's the partner council. So there's a provider side of it that you can join. There's a members council. There's going to be some tasks here. You know, a lot of you are like, hey, I can actually help other people or I can explain things. This is something I want to go through as we wrap up. Okay. And I'll actually pull up a website real quick. I won't share it just yet, but it will be live this week externally. You'll see it first here. This is a cruise. There's actually 2 of them this year. This is the first one, and we'll actually be touching most of those different countries. It is going to start in Sydney, Australia. Let me see if I can find the different points. So it starts in Sydney, Australia. It embarks on the 28th of March. Okay. This is not crazy expensive if you ask me. It's a 15-day cruise for about $1,500, and then you can get a clear phone on top of that. So $12.99 plus a clear phone to $17.99, because you got to have a clear phone to really kind of get engaged. If you've already got one, you know, just get your ticket for the $12.99. But literally 15 days, and it's the South Pacific. It actually goes to a lot of these different countries that we were just talking about. When I say countries, I'm talking about this list right here. Most of these countries it's actually going to touch on, and it's actually going to end in French Polynesia. So if you haven't been there and you've wanted to go there, you know, go to New Caledonia, Vanuatu, Fiji, Samoa, a couple different Samoas, and then it ends in French Polynesia or Tahiti. Okay. If you haven't been there, I've personally gone around the world 3 times in 3 different years, and Tahiti was probably my favorite part of the world, from just a connect with the earth and just live life, so to speak. We're not just cruising around to kind of see things, though. We're there to connect with people, with one another. Accommodations are beautiful. They're wonderful. The food's great. This is actually with Norwegian Cruise Lines, if you haven't taken one there. And I'm not one that's saying that the cruise lines are the way to go, primarily because when we had our last one planned, we literally, a lot of folks were like, I'm not getting vaccinated. If you force us to get vaccinated, we're not going. But we will actually have the stage. So We will actually have the stage. We will have events. We will have our own little meetings that will be separate. And we'll actually have little scavenger hunts. For those of you that haven't been to some of these, they're amazing. That you build relationships and connections like you can't. But it's usually we'll shut down a little city. We'll only accept these digital assets. And then we give away gifts based upon a type of a bingo game. So we give away a clear note every day based upon these games. It's a ton of fun. You can purchase your ticket. I'll come back up to that. These are some prior presentations. So if you haven't been to one prior and you actually want to see who's there. So for here, I want to zoom in real fast. Actually, maybe we can get further in. Amelia, I hope she can attend. She's actually a county commissioner. Conrad, one of the most amazing humans I've ever met. Jason, more Jason. Lee, I won't go through there, but she's in the human rights world. Paul, an amazing singer. This is right in his own backyard. He actually flew from Australia to come all the way up here. Both these guys wrote songs for Clear and different elements, and just wonderful humans.
Where can we find it, Michael?
You'll see this within this next week. That's one of the things that are going live this week.
Okay,
is this whole thing. But you'll be able to hear some of their music. As a matter of fact, I'll end on that music. And then just wonderful folks. So literally you'll get to meet some amazing, I hope Keith would join us, but you'll be able to meet some amazing folks. We don't know who's going to attend at this stage point because it'll actually, this is not Edward Snowden, who's Assange. This is his father that actually came in. Julius Assange's father came in. But just an amazing thing. You'll be able to purchase tickets here, and you'll be able to pay with these different processes. So please, connect with us if this is something that you want to do. But this one doesn't have a long leash on it. Like, we're literally 80 days out from setting sail on this puppy. So I'm going to come back over here. Before I wrap up, I'm going to ask if anyone has questions, thoughts, feedback, comments, observations, input, anything from any of the rooms. So Town Hall, Digital World, Ripple Effects, go ahead. You're shy today, huh? Okay. So we'll go ahead and wrap up on Paul's song. Wonderful song. Here we go. I actually haven't watched this in years, but we'll see.
Would you guys invite those people from the hall to come in? We're going to do
and then be able to create this song to be a reminder, because that's what music is for us, is really about being the soundtrack of our lives. So hopefully whenever you hear this song, it'll anchor us into be here at this time, our connection with each other, and also the reminder of what's possible for the world. So,
and if you'd like to sing along with us, just jump up on stage here and sing out the chorus with us, right? Especially you.
Based on the karaoke, you don't want that to happen.
All right, here we go. Pyramid of power is falling away. Decentralized systems are in vain. We need the people to share their wills with freedom of speech for all who choose. Holding the vision, our future is clear. A united new world, full of cheer. Standing in love, there is no fear. When it comes down to it, our future is clear.
So just some wonderful hearts. So for those of you that bump into Paul, just tell him we said we love him and appreciate him and hope to see him here in the short term. We'll wrap up today's call. I look forward to this thing being more of an interaction in the future, but I know it may be new to some, but we've got to start somewhere. Thank you for your time. Again, today is Tuesday, January 10th, and we're wrapping up a digital town hall meeting, the first of the season. Much love, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.